Welcome to the second ever episode of Patriot Talk. I'm Nic Horton, the editor of the Arkansas Patriot. Just want to say a big thank you to everyone for the response to the first video that we published last week. The response really has been pretty cool, and I think we're well on our way to accomplishing our goal of just getting people that aren't typically engaged in politics engaged and informed so that we can make a difference. And before we get into anything too serious today, let's just get the elephant out of the room. Yes, I got a haircut. No, I do not have a receding hairline. It's always been this high, and you can ask my mom, and I have pictures to prove it. Today, it's my privilege actually to introduce you to our first ever guest on Patriot Talk, and this is Derek Glover. Been a good friend since high school, and we've just remained really good friends and get together often to kind of discuss current events and political issues. So I just want to bring him in today, give you a little bit of background on that, and also give you some insight into kind of what we talk about. Really biggest story that's been happening is the Supreme Court hearings on Obamacare. Probably one of the coolest things about this whole process for me has just been to see how the framework that the founders put in place over 200 years ago and the system of checks and balances and the things that we have, to see that when the federal government overreaches like they have with Obamacare, that the Supreme Court can come in.
You're right. It's fascinating to watch. It's a lot of fun. It's good political theater for the political junkies. They just can't get enough of it. For me, I keep thinking, I can't believe we've gotten to this point. I can't even conceive that we're asking this question. Does the federal government have the right, legally, to force private citizens to contract business with private industry?
To see the court go out and be willing to say, let's take this and compare this to the Constitution. And no, this isn't something that was within the original framework of the founder. This isn't an enumerated power that the federal government has.
That's exactly right. Our founders built a system of government that is superior to any that's ever been formed by mankind. Our economy, which is based on laissez-faire capitalism, which has always been based on the free market and free enterprise, is as strong as any that has ever existed in the history of the world. And it still will continue to be. And when Obama took office and we were in the midst of a recession and we had just unbridled spending and folks asking themselves, is this the end of America as a world power? Is this the end of America and economic dominance? And I kept saying, no, it's not, because there are things more powerful than one man.
Just really surprising to see the tone coming from some of the justices. I think really one of the things that was most surprising to me was probably Justice Kennedy, and the way that he just really seemed agitated at times. And I think a lot of people expected him to kind of be the one that, he's going to be the swing vote either way. But I think people really thought there was a better chance to kind of pull him over to the liberal side. Look at some of the comments that he made this week. Twice he said that this bill will fundamentally change the relationship between the individual and the state in regards to Obamacare. He questioned, the Solicitor General very directly, and it just did not seem very open-minded about things at this point.
I think Kennedy knows that he's typically the guy in the middle, that he's the fifth vote, so to speak, on controversial decisions. And I think he also knows that he's going to have to be as strict a proponent of, let's focus on what does the law say, what does the Constitution say. He knows that he can't go wrong if he does that. Yeah, it's been fascinating to listen to kind of the inside of the justices. And because this argument rests on what they call the Interstate Commerce Clause. Mm-hmm. It's been the foundational principle of all government overreach for 3/4 of a century. It has been the source of overregulation, been the source of endless mounding bureaucracy. And it's all this idea of, the states are responsible for this, but because it could go across state lines, because some loose interpretation of what is interstate commerce, the federal government then regulates it. And it's been allowed to go on by the Supreme Court, by the courts at large, based on a loose interpretation of something that now they're deciding they need to very tightly interpret.
The federal government has a role to provide defense, and to do a certain limited number of enumerated things. and the rest of the things are supposed to be left up to the states. And there's a great article here that I read last week called The Federalist Solution by Jonah Goldberg. Been meaning to write a blog post about this, decided to save it for today. The bleating about broken government and partisanship continues. Why can't those boobs in Washington agree on anything? We're constantly told that the way to fix the country is to dethrone the left and the right and empower the middle. But what if the real compromise isn't forcing the left and the right to heal? What if instead the solution is to disempower the national elites who think they've got the answers to everything? Federalism, the process whereby you push most political questions to the lowest democratic level possible.
Federalism is, I think, a message that needs to be sounded with a bullhorn. And I think the first step in making it more understood, more widely heard, is going to be the deconstruction of this Interstate Commerce Clause interpretation, and it might start with this Supreme Court decision.
Just kind of moving forward, I want to just kind of talk about two things, kind of if Obamacare stands and if Obamacare goes down. First, let's say if it stands. All signs, all indications at this point are that the court is going to rule that the law be overturned. Let's say politically, what's the impact for this year's election? Where do we go from here?
I think politically, and I don't mean to say this with my fingers crossed that Obamacare stands, I think it'll re-energize what they call the Tea Party movement. Mm-hmm. I think it'll re-energize the grassroots conservatives because, quite frankly, they're going to be ticked. This is widely hated as a piece of legislation. So I think politically it's going to re-energize the grassroots conservatives. I don't know what kind of effect it'll have at this stage in the presidential race, other than it's going to become the election issue. Because if this is allowed to stand, if the federal government can tell people you have to buy insurance for your health, then they can then begin to tell us what we can do in our private lives as it relates to our health. What car you can drive, what food you can eat, can you smoke, can you drink? I think it is the fundamental linchpin of all freedoms, and it'll be the beginning of the end for a free society in this country if this is upheld.
Let's also play out the hypothetical that the Supreme Court does move ahead and strike down the mandate, which we all pretty much agree, I think even the left agrees, is going to cripple the law all the way across the board.
If the individual mandate's stricken and the law itself stands, we need to see a new CBO score on this thing, because the mandate is a major mechanism of funding. I'd like to see what happens to the cost of Obamacare if the mandate's gone. You're not going to have much, it's probably going to double or triple in cost.
Well, so economically, I mean, you're an economist of sorts, degree in economics. Yeah. What do you think between now and the election, if Obamacare is struck down in June, how much does the economy recover? What impact does that have from an economic standpoint?
This is, my personal opinion. It's not based on anything other than general observation. But I think if the law is done away with, the general economy, there's so many other factors that make that up. I don't know between now and election time if it's going to affect the economy per se. It'll be seen as trouble for Obama and possibly good news for the economy, because investors do not trust this president. I think over the summer, though, gas prices will probably continue to go up. That'll continue to be a major campaign issue if this law is done away with. So economically, we still have a tough row to hoe. This Obamacare thing, it's going to depend a lot on how the court handles it. I follow a lot of people of various political stripes on Twitter. One of the more liberal folks that I've followed made this statement. It would be an incredible, fundamental, paradigm-shifting overreach on the part of the court if they struck down an entire law like this one. And I thought to myself...
As if that's never happened before.
I thought to myself, how disingenuous of a liberal to see the court actually doing their constitutional duty, actually fulfilling their constitutional role by examining law and comparing it to the Constitution and striking down this law, and then for them to cry judicial activism. Hello, Roe versus Wade. I mean, hello, every decision that's come out of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals in California. Judicial activism is the exclusive property of the left in America. To me, they would have to be really stupid to think that people aren't going to look right through that.
That's about all we had to discuss today. Thanks, Eric, for coming on. Enjoyed it. Hopefully you'll come back and
Yeah.
We can do it again sometime. Well, that concludes another edition of Patriot Talk. Hope you enjoyed it. Please consider sharing with your friends on Facebook and Twitter, subscribing to our YouTube channel. Remember to check out the blog, arkansaspatriot.us. And remember what Sam Adams said. The truth is, all might be free if they valued freedom and defended it as they ought. We'll see you next time.